enough. I just need to
Yeah.
remember that this one isn't the mouse I need to go for.
Yeah.
So anyway, the first topic we were going to talk about, our first headline, is the increase in violence in Iraq over the last couple of days, which has been... I don't know if it's completely surprising because the situation is still pretty bad there and still pretty volatile, and those who are paying close attention to it know that, but people had sort of gotten the idea that things were better in Iraq, and over the
Well, it was
last
for a
couple...
while.
And it was better than this, but for the last couple of days, things have really been out of control. There was a suicide bombing that took out like 60 people, and then there was a separate attack by 2 women on an important Shiite shrine in Baghdad. Which always the attacks on shrines always strike me as really strange, because it seems to me like even if you were a Shiite and you hated Sunnis, or you were a Sunni and you hated Shiites, if you were a Muslim you wouldn't attack a Muslim shrine. So I'm always very suspicious of these attacks.
I mean, there do seem to be some groups of crazy fundamentalists that are convinced that, the biggest threat to Islam is other groups of crazy fundamentalists that don't agree with them, and so it could be with that kind of thing, but that's pretty out there,
It's extremely out there. It it would have to... people doing it either are illogical,
and the other thing is, given a choice
Muslims.
between blowing up, another kind of Muslims and blowing up Christians, which, there are certainly plenty of Christian soldiers around in Iraq. I mean, you'd think that people would choose the more halal target, so to speak. That.
That's what I'm saying. There's something that seems off to me about it. Not that I have any specific information that makes me think that it was the CIA or anything, but if anything is the CIA, this seems like a good candidate for that sort of thing.
It could be people, in Iraq that have an interest in trying to keep the U.S. in there, was a thought that I had.
Yeah, but they'd have to be secular people. You know what I mean? They'd have to be business people or military contractors or something like that. But
maybe it's Chalabi.
Oh, Chalabi has no fucking chance in Iraq. I mean, he needs to just stop trying.
That.
But anyway, so the other thing is, and we don't really have a set answer for this, but we were kind of thinking, what is this an indicator of? I mean, it's a very new thing. It's only been over the last couple of days, but can this actually be a signal of a new direction in Iraq? Could this hold up the U.S. withdrawal? Which is a very interesting topic because, of course, we have the Status of Forces Agreement. It's kind of a moot point, as far as what's legal. The U.S. needs to withdraw by a certain point, unless the Iraqis ask them to stay. So I guess that gives credence to your point. Perhaps, Talabani's the only one that probably wouldn't want him to stay because he's got a pretty good hold on his area up there, but...
Yeah.
The main central civilian government in Iraq is not very powerful, and they actually perhaps could want the Americans to stay, even though the civilians don't.
Yeah, I mean, the civilians might put in a different, government,
Well, that's the problem. My personal feeling as far as Iraq, and I don't know how long it's been since we've talked about this, is that the key to having any multicultural society is to have a secular government where people are not given power based on the trait that defines them, in this case Sunni, Shia, Kurd, Christian, whatever. You need to have we need to have separation of church and state in this, and the fact that the Bush administration started out by saying, we're going to do it so that there's if there's this many Sunnis, this is how many Sunnis are going to be in parliament, and if there's this many Shia, that's fucking bullshit. It needs to not be that way. And, you're only going to foment religious violence if you hand out power based on religious identity.
I mean, in some cases you might have to. I mean, Lebanon is sort of like that. The country's government is kind of like this elaborate peace agreement between the different factions, and they kind of have to hand out, there are these established precedents, that certain positions go to certain sects in their government, that in their case they do it because the alternative is shooting at each other. But other than that,
well, Lebanon's main problem is Israel. I think that's not hyperbole to say. Maybe I'm wrong, but
there was.
I think if they only had to deal with the influence of Iran, for example, they could deal. But they've got different, all these
Yeah,
different
and the other
factions on
thing is
different
that, you know,
sides.
just the issues with Israel have a tendency to crowd out anything else. Now, I mean, in some ways, like Israel can be a huge unifying force in the Arab world because they all hate Israel.
Mm.
But maybe that's the solution to sectarian violence in Iraq is that they could declare war on Israel.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
we don't need that. We really
yeah.
don't need that. So I don't know. We've got a few more minutes here before we go on to our next topic. Is there anything else you want to add in regards to the Iraq
Um,
situation and especially the last couple of days?
Yeah, and also that whatever happens, I'm not expecting the media to get really excited about it. I mean, Iraq has just been done into the ground. Like
Well,
they're
it's definitely not the sexy topic at this
yeah
point as far as the media is concerned. I mean, without doubt, I would give it like the fifth place position. If something happens in Iraq, it's the fifth
yeah
thing they talk about, which is really a shame because even though we're moving troops to Afghanistan, we still have fucking tons more troops in Iraq than we do in Afghanistan. And as far as how broken the country is as a result of us, we owe a lot
yeah.
more rebuilding effort to Iraq than Afghanistan at this point.
Well, if it could in fact be done, which it may be impossible to have enough security to reconstruct much in either Iraq or Afghanistan. Um, And of course, in Afghanistan, it's much worse. It's much harder to get things into there. But we can talk about that in a later segment.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we actually have another segment that's sort of related to this, and our viewer makes an interesting point, which is that religion is really powerful in the Middle East, and he doesn't think that state and religion can be separated there. But I beg to differ
Saddam
because
Hussein did it.
yeah, first of all, Saddam Hussein did it. Second of all, there had been times, despite what the history of the Crusades shows us, where different religious groups lived together with no problem. For example, the people of the book, they weren't considered full citizens, but Jews and Christians were allowed to live under Islam and under
Yeah.
Sharia. They weren't killed, which kind of, it
You
sounds
see, in
extreme
in
today,
Chris
but
in
at the
Chris yeah,
time,
and in Christianity, for instance, Jews were in pretty serious trouble in the Middle Ages, and there don't seem to have been any Muslims in medieval Christian Europe. I think they were just killed on sight. That's the only explanation I can come up with.
So the thing is, it's a good point that it's a big thing to overcome, but I think it can be overcome. It's just a matter of how you work it, and I tend to believe that almost everything can be explained from a position of self-interest. So you can tell these people why it's in their best interest to chill the fuck out, and they just might do it. So this is the end of this segment.